For coming today. It's you know, as I was mentioning to someone, it's always perplexing. Ann Arbor is like one of these towns where I can never figure out how many people are actually going to show up to these. We had about the same amount of sign-ups as last time, but we obviously didn't have as many show-ups as this last time. I think it's like the riddle of the Sphinx here. If I can figure it out, then I'm good and I can leave. I think that's going to be. We try to do these about once a month. We always try to pick a different topic. Last month we talked to young entrepreneurs. Next month, which we'll be doing on March 28th, back at Connor O'Neill's, we're doing what's called the exit interview. We're going to do a panel discussion with people who are moving out of Ann Arbor, away, to find out why, what it is that, why they're giving up, or why they have to leave, or why they're reluctant to leave, or all of the above. Our speaker series is underwritten by the Michigan State Housing Authority, and of course I'd like to thank Eric for letting us do this, and downstairs. If you ever want to give me feedback, or you have ideas for future events, don't hesitate to shoot me an email. It's jeff@concentratemedia.com. One of the things, I think I should have a disclaimer right away, or full disclosure. I actually sit on the board of 826 Michigan, so I am not a disinterested party. Nevertheless, one of the reasons I, in particular, thought this would be an interesting topic is when I think about nonprofits, whether it's been here or in other communities, if they are not tied to a theater or a performance space or a physical space, usually they are fairly anonymous to me. They might have an office somewhere, but I have no clue where that office is or who the people are that are engaged with it. And one of the things that struck me even before I got involved with 826 Michigan that is unique is that this is an organization that actually has a physical presence in the community that doesn't seem to be tied to their mission, although I think, as Amanda will show you, it is. But on first blush, at first glance, you would walk in and go, what the heck does a robot repair store have to do with tutoring kids? And I think that's one of the things that makes it so unique. The other thing that right away that struck me, having been involved with nonprofits for, like 20 years now, is I'm amazed by how well 826 mobilizes volunteers, how they attract them, how they retain them, how they encourage them. It's truly impressive. One of the reasons I thought that it would be good to have Amanda here, and I'll introduce you in a second, is that I think she knows a little bit of how the secret sauce of the organization works. And I was hoping that she could share that, and also give you a sense of what it's like to have a organization that has a sense of place in the community. So Amanda Uhle is the executive director of 826 Michigan. If you don't already know, it's a nonprofit writing center dedicated to school-age kids. It helps them with creative and expository writing skills. It offers after-school tutoring. They have a presence in downtown, but they're also in the schools, both Ann Arbor, Ypsilanti, and now in Detroit. And I think what they found is that one-on-one tutoring is more effective with kids in helping them develop these writing skills that actually apply to many skills in their lives. Amanda's been doing this since 2006. I was going to say 7 years, right? Yeah, so for 7 years, which again is also impressive. Again, I don't see it there, I always find that nonprofits either have somebody who's been there forever or seems to rotate every couple of years. Amanda seems to be in that nice middle ground. Yeah. So, without further ado, I'm going to have Amanda come up. If you could give her a warm welcome. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you. And thanks to all of you for being here. It's incredible honor to be part of the Concentrate series. I'm a big fan of their work and what Model D and the other affiliated companies do, and I love the space too. I don't know if any of you have been here before 5 p.m. when Sandy is making his coffee, but I am a regular in this spot too. So thank you for being here. So as Jeff said, 826 Michigan is known primarily for the sort of innovative writing and tutoring programs that we do for students, school-age students. And the other thing that we tend to be known for in the community is the really astounding, to me even, number of volunteers that we're able to engage. And I don't in any way want this to be about me taking credit for that, because we have lots of help, and we benefit a lot from the national organization that we're affiliated with that was founded by the writer Dave Eggers, who I'll talk about in a minute. But I think there are many reasons why people are attracted to work with us, and it's something that we think about a lot and we appreciate in a very deep way. So I hope I can express some of that to you, and I hope also to sort of get to know some of you in this room through maybe some questions later. I am immensely proud of everything we do at 826 Michigan. Our student programs, of course, chief among them. But what I come back to over and over again about as my true point of pride in leading this organization is the efficiency that we have. You know, in a role like mine, you have to look at that. We have a really small staff. It's been about 5.5 full-time until last week. We hired 1 new person. So we have actually 7 staff members now. Our volunteer list is 2,000. So, and we ran the organization as a two-person paid staff organization for a long time. We've just been really fortunate, and things have been great for us the last year or so. We've been able to build our staff a little bit more. And we hope that in building our staff, we'll then build up our volunteers too. But we accomplished a whole lot. We serve about 2,500 students now, and we hope that in 5 years, we'll just about double that with our bigger staff and our expansion to Detroit. But we have a pretty small staff. Pretty small budget. We have about a $330,000, $350,000 budget, and we estimate that volunteers add about $200,000 in value to what we do. So it's a pretty big chunk of what we do. Volunteers are our biggest donor, essentially. They really make it possible. Sounds cheesy, but it's true. And I will say, I'm guessing some of you that are here are in the nonprofit field and sort of know this about a job like mine. In a job like mine, you wind up doing just a tremendous amount of asking for money and for time, and that's what the job is. And you know, my friends and people like that will say, well, isn't it just a huge drag to always be asking? And it's not. And the reason it's not for me and for this organization is because I know that we're doing things in a way that I really believe in. We're doing all the things that I think people think nonprofits do poorly. We're really judicious about how we spend funds because we have volunteers that help offset the costs. We really, truly engage people. We engage adults in the community as well as students. And then we meet a need. And we serve schools and students, as you know, and we have waiting lists of schools and students that want to do more with us. So we know that we're relevant and we're meeting that need, which is great. I hope that in this talk, even though it seems like I'm putting myself forth as an expert in this, I hope you will understand that my position on it is it's a little bit magical how volunteers come to an organization and how they stay and how they become engaged and how that all works. So I'm not an expert. I can share what I know, but it is magical, and it is part of it. It's about just really good people. This slide, I'll start with my slides now. This is a good person. This is Katie, who's on the left here. And I think what I love about this image is it demonstrates what is wrong with how people think about volunteerism. So a lot of times when you think about volunteerism, you get an image of someone sacrificing their time, doing the hard work of some onerous thing, and making someone else happy. So Katie is on the left. She is doing that. This child is, I think, happy. We would agree. But I also love to think about, you can't see Katie's face, so like, what is Katie getting out of that experience? She has provided this aha moment for the students, and that gets her homework. And that's pretty great. So reframing the way we think about volunteers and volunteerism as a reciprocal thing is really important. And we're really selling ourselves short in the nonprofit field if we just think we're asking volunteers to do just this terrible hard work. It's a nightmare, because it's actually pretty great, or can be pretty great. Next slide. Here are the basic things we believe. I'm going to talk, by the way, in two chunks. I'm going to first tell you in just a broad way what 826 Michigan does, and then I'll talk a little bit more about our volunteer program and kind of how I think we're doing it right. We believe writing is essential for every child. I'm sure we can all agree on that. We believe great success comes from one-on-one attention, and that is something that is proven to be disappearing from our contemporary society. There are more and more single-parent homes, larger and larger teacher-to-student ratios in classrooms, the internet, all kinds of reasons why people are having less time one-on-one with young people. And then core thing for us is that everything we do is free. I will probably say that again in this talk because it really it helps, I think, with the volunteer recruitment piece for us, but it really truly equalizes our students and our volunteers, and I think it helps us achieve a kind of diversity that we probably wouldn't get if we were a little bit more narrow in our focus. So, next slide. Here's the next time. I'm going to say everything's free. The sort of basic outline of our programs. We serve 2,500 students a year. We have 400 volunteers that are really active. They do something with us weekly, 400 folks. And that's a list of, I said before, about 2,000 volunteers have been through our orientation and are familiar with us and can support us in some way. And sometimes those folks are once a year or they have some kind of role with us. But 400 people really put forth some weekly time. And then they contribute about 20,000 hours in total. And here's, I think Jeff called it secret sauce. Here's what I think is why, or the reasons why our volunteer program is strong. We make it so easy. We do the dirty work as a staff, not as volunteers, and we play to volunteer strengths. And I'm going to talk about the programs first, and then get into the volunteer piece. But you know, what I would love to do, I said before I'd love to get to know any of you. If people have questions or thoughts as I'm going, don't be afraid. I'm a pretty casual speaker, so make yourself known. And yes, that's the dirty work part. I'm going to get to that. Okay. But I think in general, what I mean by that is people think about volunteering as like the grunt work and like the work that nobody wants to do, nobody on the staff wants to do, and so you put the envelope stuffing on volunteers or whatever it is. And our volunteer stuff envelopes, I'll be honest, that happens. But what I hope is that our volunteer experiences are really satisfying and that no volunteer feels like, okay, I'm doing this work that the staff is too good to do or doesn't want to do it. And for instance, literal dirty work, our staff of 6, now 7, rotates cleaning week. So we don't have a cleaning service, we don't have volunteers clean. You know, every 6 weeks I clean, every 6 weeks our volunteer coordinator cleans. So we take really seriously that our volunteer experiences should be meaningful. And it's the rare volunteer will say, I would find deep meaning in cleaning the toilets at 826 Michigan once a week, but most don't. Most want to have a connection with a student or do something a little bit different. So, yes.
I have 2 questions. First,
sure.
Do you mainly just focus on writing or reading, speaking, and
writing?
Is that all kind of goes together?
It all kind of goes together. We focus on making students, or helping students be more successful in school and making them stronger writers. And feeling...
So it is more writing.
It's more writing.
To build their confidence in that area.
Yeah. And we think writing and confidence in writing kind of helps across the board academically. It helps with employment readiness, all kinds of things. We think writing is just a core thing. Right. But I'm going to talk about our programs, and maybe I'll do that. Happy to keep taking questions, though. I love that 2 of you had questions right away. Let's go to the next one. So taking a step back, our organization nationally was founded by the writer Dave Eggers. About almost 15 years ago now. He wrote a book called The Heartbreaking Work of Staggering Genius that some of you may know. And when that book was successful, in that book, if you don't know, a very short summary of it, he kind of became a single parent as a very young man. He was about 21 or 22 and both of his parents died, and he raised his 8-year-old brother at that point. So he had a very vivid, real experience of being a single parent, navigating the public schools, addressing some of the issues that our organization addresses, and then his book was really successful, so he was able to take those experiences and he wanted to make his neighborhood better. And the neighborhood that he was in, still is in, is the Mission District in San Francisco. And he realized, as he was kind of formulating the way that this organization would work, that one of the things we do as a society is when we are, when we want to help somebody, we put them in a box and we label them in a really negative way. Like, instead of starting this organization and calling it the San Francisco Center for Remedial Students Who Are Struggling, Who Are Terrible at School, that's like how we tend to name our organizations and name programs that help people. He wanted to totally neutralize it and call it the address, which is 826 Valencia. And that's how we got our funny name, which I'll go into in a bit. But that was in 2002. It's been almost 11 years. You go to the next slide. And we are in 8 places now. So the first 826 was at that address. The model, which essentially was in the Mission District, there were lots of young, creative, professional types that were kind of almost employed. They maybe were freelancers, they maybe didn't have a family in full swing yet, so they had a little bit of time. Matching up those people in that time with young people who maybe were in a single parent home who could really benefit from those couple of hours a week. So the whole idea was matching up those couple hour chunks of people in the neighborhood. And it worked really tremendously well in 2002 in San Francisco, and then a pilot was started in New York, and now we're pretty steady at 8 chapters. I don't know that we have massive growth plans underway, except for growth like what we're undertaking, which is we've operated for 7 years in Ann Arbor, Ypsilanti, and now we're expanding to Detroit. So that's national. You can go to the next slide. So all of our organizations do locally very relevant work, very important work, I believe, but smallish. I mean, we serve 2,500 students. But when you look at our numbers nationally, we make a pretty huge impact, not just with serving students, which we served over almost 32,000 nationally last year, but if you look at that volunteer number, it's about 5,000 really active. So those are people who weekly do something with a student around the country, which is cool. Next one. And we run a robot. As if this wasn't enough, we run a robot store. The store does a ton of important things for us. As you can imagine, it generates revenue for us, so it actually pays the rent and a little bit of our monthly utility and other costs. It's a portal to the community, so when Jeff was talking about spaces for nonprofits, the robot store allows us to meet people. Certainly new students and families, but it also allows us to meet new volunteers in a way that I think is really unique. I heard this, I think, a couple of days ago, and I always wish people were like one little notch more curious than they are. Because this woman walked by our store and said, "I just can't believe a place like that can stay in business. That's ridiculous. There's a robot store." Many people, though, have that thought or think, "This is so weird. Why is a robot store here?" And they open the door and they usually say, "This is so weird. What are you guys doing back here? Is it really a robot store?" And it is, and it functions in that way to sort of help us meet new people. But I think one of the most meaningful things that it does is it addresses that issue that I mentioned before about the stigma with getting help. It really helps our students feel amazing about coming to our space and getting help. I think similarly, it helps our volunteers feel that way too. So it's important, even though it seems kind of ancillary and maybe weird, but you can go to the next one.
Do you want to tell them the origin of that?
The origin of the store? You mean in San Francisco?
Yeah, there's the theme.
Yeah, I can do that. So Dave Eggers, 2002, was in the Mission District and was really deeply committed, for the reasons I said before, to having the organization be called 826 Valencia. And signed a lease, was very deeply in the process of establishing that space as the Writing and Tutoring Center when he learned that the space was actually zoned just for retail. So it was a little too late to switch spaces at that point, and the landlord said, "You just have you have to sell cappuccinos or pencils and paper or something to meet the code." And the creative people that were involved, again, lots of artists and designers and writers, thought that it was the Bay Area. There was no other pirate store in the Bay Area, so we might as well have a full-on pirate supply, which they do. And the pirate store literally sells, depending on your budget, a glass eye or an eye patch, peg legs. I mean, they sell stuff for pirates because that was a market that hadn't been tapped in San Francisco. Likewise, we have the robot store. And around the country, we all have these sort of engaging stores. So it was this accidental thing that caused us as organizations to all have really unique, compelling, kind of community-minded spaces.
So how did you come up with the idea for a robot store in Ann Arbor?
You know, all of our stores around the country have some kind of local relevance or resonance. And I think in Michigan, robots kind of have that. We have the auto industry, and we have, I don't know, it just sort of fit. It just sort of felt right. It felt like something that would compel students. Another thing that I think is true about a lot of our stores is that even though what happens, in our case, behind the red velvet curtain, which is this stuff, even though that stuff is more creative, writing, literacy based, a lot of our stores are kind of science-y. So we tap into students and young people and volunteers who are maybe more more inclined toward math and science. We offer 2 tutoring programs, after-school homework help. One is at Ypsilanti Middle School and one is behind the red curtain at Liberty Street. Hopefully in some time there will be a 3rd one in Detroit, but we're not there yet. Next slide. We offer in-school programs, so we partner with teachers to effectively lower the student-teacher ratio on an annual basis. So we make a commitment to go to school for a whole year and support teachers' writing. So the teacher gives the lesson, and then we go student to student and help our students write more effectively and with more confidence. A lot of times what happens in a classroom is a teacher has like 36 or 38 students, 1 adult in that room. And when our tutors go in, they really help not just lower the ratio, but they can give as little as 5 or 7 minutes with a student who maybe is just having a hard time getting started, and they can give that boost and give some confidence.
Are you seeing 36, 38 students in Ann Arbor public schools?
Ypsilanti and Detroit.
Okay.
Ann Arbor public schools are a lot lower.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It depends on the school too. There are some Ann Arbor classrooms that are.
And usually upper L, right? Upper elementary?
In high school.
Oh, in high school.
We go up through age 18, so
Oh, I see. So it's not just
some of the high school,
elementary, but you actually go up to high school.
I think our pictures, somebody else has mentioned that to me before. Our photos tend to favor the little
elementary.
extra cute ones. Not that high schoolers aren't cute, but
it's a lot for elementary.
It is a lot for elementary, but it is 36 for elementary in Ypsilanti now. So.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. So we do about 32 hours a week in Ypsilanti, and we're about 10 hours a week in Detroit, but we just started, literally last week we started, so we're hoping to increase that. Next one. We publish student writing. I put in the booth back there is a whole range of our student publications. Some are casual like that one. But now that you're helping, you can help. There's a hardcover book. We do a range of things. We think publishing student writing is just this essential part of the experience and sort of validating what students have to say. You can go on. These are our most recent 2 publications that were the result of us being in a school for a year. And the next slide is also about publications. This is what it's like. Students often have like just a total discipline. This is a student, we were in his classroom every week from September to May. And we said, we're going to take your writing, we're going to publish your writing. But still, we present him with a hardcover book that he's published in, and he's a little bit astounded and delighted and proud. So, and we're proud of that work too. You can go to the next one. We do workshops in the evenings. We do them at public libraries all over Ypsilanti and Ann Arbor.
There's one right now.
There's one happening right now. We do community outreach, so we partner with a number of other organizations that serve students' other needs, and we can sort of provide the writing literacy piece. And the next one, we do a small English language learners program. So we have this a whole range of things that volunteers can get involved with. And one of the things that's exciting for us is that when a volunteer comes to us, we don't have just one thing that they can do or try. In fact, some of our volunteers, I find this so fascinating because it happens all the time. Folks come to our orientations, they feel really connected to what we do, really excited to sit down and do this or tutor or go to a school, and they do it once or twice, and they come to one of our staff members and say, you know, I thought I liked working with kids more than I do. This is hard, not my thing, whatever. But we have other volunteer opportunities, like working in our robot store or things. So there's a menu of options. Next one, please. So field trips. And this gets a little bit to the placemaking thing. Our field trips, this is the last program I'm going to tell you about that our students do. We invite an entire second grade, almost every Friday morning, to come to our space. We tell them just about nothing about what they're going to do and what the field trip is about. And one of the reasons we tell them nothing about it is these are students who, even at 8 years old, feel uncomfortable writing, feel uncomfortable and lack confidence in that world. And that may be because they don't have books at home, they don't see reading and writing happening very frequently. So instead of saying, you're going to learn to be better writers, thanks for coming, Amy. Amy's one of our volunteers, so I know she had to leave early. So instead of kind of setting up that expectation that they have to do this thing, we tell them very little. In fact, they happen Friday mornings. We welcome them by saying, welcome to the Thursday toast making workshop. So we totally throw them off. And so they're 8 years old and they think that all the adults in the room have the wrong day of the week in their heads. And they think, because we tell them we're making toast, we start talking about cinnamon raisin toast and rye bread. And I would say they're adequately confused, right? And some brave child raises their hand and says, it's actually Friday. And they realize that the sort of sense of power has shifted. Instead of being in a classroom where the grown-ups and the adults know everything and are in control, sometimes the kids know more than the adults. And sometimes what they have to say is really important and really relevant. So we kind of switch things up. We do a whole bunch of, I won't get into it, but it's pretty dramatic, pretty cool stuff with these second graders. They write books, they work collectively, then they write their own ending. We have a professional illustrator there that's illustrating the books. And then we bind the books and they all go home with their books. So this is like one of our most successful, most exciting programs. And we didn't feel like it needed improvement, but being improvers, we tried. Next slide. Anybody know the violin monster?
Yeah.
So it would be wrong for me to tell you, and I never will, who he really is, but he's one of our tutors as well as the violin monster. So we thought, we'll take this field trip idea that we have that we do successfully like once a week. We'll invite the violin monster to come, and we'll make it twice as magical and twice as satisfying and wonderful. And so everybody get ready for the images of the students and their expressions of glee and wonder. Go ahead, Jeff. Totally, like, whatever. It's a werewolf tutoring me. You can go to the next one too.
That's really cool.
So, I mean, he came to play violin, which he did, and they liked it, but we realized why we didn't get the reaction we all anticipated. Absent the violin monster, we created a space where students can be themselves, can get serious about writing, can expect anything, can be surprised, can surprise themselves if they thought they were rotten students and bad writers and couldn't do it. They don't have to think that anymore. And that kind of energy and that spirit pervades our organization. That's who we are. So students who have never had a family member go to college can envision, well, hey, 826, maybe I can do that. Students who don't have books at home, they can write a book and be part of our publishing program. So we really do a lot to transcend expectations, and I think being able to be part of that is a really critical part of why volunteers love the experience that we give them. And it's also part of what I think volunteers experience themselves, is that sort of transcendence of expectations. So we love the violin monster. It didn't work out, what we thought didn't work out, but that's okay. So onto the volunteer piece a little more specifically. Here's a quote from one of our longtime volunteers and tutors, and you can read it yourselves. I hope you can all see it. But she says one of the things that she loves is seeing the immediate results of a student really getting it. So in terms of making it easy, we make the experience for volunteers really satisfying, really meaningful, and just a really genuine experience for them. Again, envelopes are stuffed. I'm not going to say they're not ever stuffed, but we give volunteers that chance to do something that they really see that they're making a difference in. And we make it easy to get started. A lot of organizations, and I can completely see how and why they do this, they require a lot up front. require a schedule or a minimum number of hours, and we don't. And we wind up processing kind of large numbers of volunteers, and then a slightly smaller number stay deeply engaged. But that's okay, because when you leave it open and really easy for people to get involved, we find that it's such a satisfying experience that the really best tutors and the really greatest volunteers want to do more. And they wind up committing way more than if we'd asked them for like a minimum commitment. And honestly, as I said before, it's not for everyone. So sometimes people start and it's not for them and they don't stick with it, but most do. Next one. The dirty work. I already talked about the toilets, so I'm not going to talk about that again. But here's a student named Brittany who says she feels like when she's tutoring, she's not this all-knowing authority figure. She's almost like a friend to the student. So that's the feeling we want our tutors to have. We don't want our tutors to feel like they're doing the least desirable work in the organization. We really take seriously as a staff that that's what we should do. The uncomfortable conversations, the behavior management, the things that nobody wants to really do, that's what our staff takes on, and we give our volunteers the fun stuff. Next one. And we play to their strengths. I'm so sorry that our volunteer Amy Walsh had to leave, because this is this image, not the quote, but the image is hers. Amy is a writer, and a friend of hers is an environmental educator, and Amy's husband is a photographer. And the three of them work together every season to do a nature walk in the Arb, which this is last winter. They write about what they see, and then we take some still photos. Her husband takes still photos, and then they make this little video. It is really a beautiful, stunning experience for the students. So fun to watch. And what's important to know about like that workshop is I didn't sit in my office and say, well, we should really be doing this, and I'm going to assign some volunteer to do this. This came of resources and people and things in our community that really were meaningful to those volunteers. So this is not a workshop that happens at 826 LA. It's not like we make this all uniform. This is something that really came of the community and came from Amy's skills. Amy also has skills in web design, and she's making a website for us. So our volunteers were able to really tap into what people have and what they want to give, and to capitalize on it. Questions? I saw somebody starting a question.
I have questions.
Yes.
I mean, is this the end?
This is basically the end. The next slide says, if you want to volunteer with us, here's how.
I kind of have this feeling that you provide volunteerism that is supported by people who contribute in some way. So financially, how does it work? And I didn't really get that. How does 826 work financially? How do they pay the rent? How do they get their funding?
Not by way of volunteers.
Yes, I figured that.
Okay.
Because I mean, harnessing volunteer power, you know, for a purpose of you have funding, you just want to get people to motivate it. Is that what this is about, or is it about sustainability of an organization that supports people who volunteer their time? I'm kind of confused.
Can you restate your question? I'm sorry.
So,
You mean what do they do with the budget?
Yeah, how does the budget work? How do they get their funding, and how does that motivate how much you can utilize your resources? Because you do a lot of the dirty work, and you get people to do the fun stuff. So,
yeah.
So where does that come from? Where's the real motivation of creating a sustainable organization that gives volunteers an opportunity to have fun?
So how do we
doing time for free?
Fundraise?
Yeah.
Around that? We fundraise mostly separate from volunteers, and we keep. I think that for the amount of work that we accomplish and what we do, we would need to fundraise much more to accomplish that if it weren't for volunteers, because they provide that.
So what kind of fundraising do you do?
Yeah, so how do you fund the programs? Is
Sure.
what I'm saying.
Grants are part of the picture. Individual donations, of course. And then our store actually does a nice amount of the bottom line fundraising for things like our rent and the basics. And then the one way that we do a lot of events, and our volunteers can take part in events sometimes as fundraisers. It's not the main thing we do, but it is a way that volunteers can engage with us and sort of help the bottom line. We're doing a trivia, like pub trivia for cheaters event next month. So volunteers or anyone can join a team. they can ask friends and family for donations, and then when it comes to the trivia tournament, the more they've raised, the more they can cheat at the trivia competition and do that. But really our funding is
Mitten Fest.
Mitten Fest is a music festival that we do, which is a 5-day event at Woodruff's in Ypsilanti. We use volunteers for things like staffing the door at events like that, but they're not, they tend not to be our donors.
Do the public schools give you any money?
No, we don't get any money from the public schools. Pretty independently
From
funded.
the state? Oh, the
Not
grants.
from the state.
Yeah, the grants.
We haven't got any state or other government funding. So private foundations,
You do it all
corporations.
on your own?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't you do a large film for the release of, what was it, 5-year engagement? Or?
We did. 5-year engagement was filmed here about 2 years ago, I guess now. And one of the producers of the film is a friend of Dave Eggers, who's our founder. And that was how that connection came to be. But when they were filming, actually, that producer called me and said, "We love what you do. We'd love to find a way to help." And that's sort of what we landed on. But events like that also really help us do what we need to do, which is spread the word among large numbers of people to get them in the door as volunteers or other supporters.
And if you don't mind me chiming in, I think also one of the things I've observed with 826 is with the events that they put on, that actually has a dual effect with volunteers. One, it utilizes volunteers, but also these events tend to attract volunteers because they bring about a certain personality to the organization. And so what happens is, it's not like 826 came up with Mitten Fest. Mitten Fest was some fans of local band, the local music scene that wanted to put on this festival, and some of them happened to be volunteering. Actually, one now is on our board, happened to be volunteering at the organization, and they said, "Why don't we do this for you guys?" And I think one of the things that I've noticed about 826 is that it has that flexibility. It's not rigid in how it receives volunteer involvement, and so you'll have this event spring up that's in support of 826, that 826 says, "We're not going to micromanage you. If you can do this and help us out, fabulous. We'll promote it, we'll do everything we can, and we will thank you to the ends of the earth for all you're doing for us." So I think there's a democratization of sorts among the volunteers that makes them feel like they have a piece of it, ownership in it, which you don't see in a lot of organizations. I think one of the wonderful things about 826 is it's not a very top-down. It's very much ground up.
True. Which kind of goes to my point about playing to volunteer strengths. If they have a resource or a connection or something to give, we do what we can to make that viable for us.
Did you say that in each of your locations that there's a store of some kind? Is that what I was?
Country? Yes.
So each one, and they each have a different flavor.
Space Travel in Seattle, Superhero Supplies in Brooklyn, and goes on and on. So they're kind of, as I said, related in some way to the city that they're located in.
And so the funding model basically is the same. It's just tweaked for each location.
Yeah.
And do you know what you're going to do in Detroit?
Well, Detroit is not a separate organization. It's the same as the organization stands now. So I believe that we're going to stay in the robot realm. I can't be much more specific than that because I don't know, because we're still getting there. It'll take us a good year and a half before we have a location there. The work that we started in Detroit is in public schools, and we're going to have a small office that we rent. But yeah, we're not quite there with the location in Detroit. We will be. Yes.
I have a question. I'm here for the Ann Arbor Civic Theater, and so we're a community theater and entirely rely on volunteers. I'm a volunteer, I'm just wondering, for us, we have no problem getting people for the glamorous,
Yes.
like acting and
Right.
directing type jobs, and we can. How do I put this delicately? There's an audition process, so it's a community theater, so it's inclusive, but also there's a certain skill level to be involved, and that is also true for a lot of the technical stuff. Is there, I don't know if you guys attract, obviously you have smart people working with you. Is there some kind of secret to attracting people to give their time in a, skilled labor?
Well, that's a really interesting point, and I think it speaks to maybe a difference between our organizations. In our case, we really emphasize that the requirements to volunteer are few. We do provide some training, and certainly we do a background check. We make sure people are safe and ready to work with students. But really what we believe students need most of all is a caring adult who can sit next to them and say, what a great idea, let's continue with that. That's what they need, rather than someone to teach per se. So we do not so much teaching and technical work in our organization. We do a lot of supporting, one-on-one confidence building, that sort of thing. Obviously, we need people who are educated and who can
It would be more difficult to
represent us well.
train each volunteer, like over 400.
That kind of goes to our point about making it really easy. And in a case like yours, it seems like what might be interesting, and I'm sure you've tried this, but having volunteers kind of mentor other volunteers in those skilled things would be a really cool way to empower the existing volunteers and help them feel like they have an even more meaningful role. But that is a little bit different from what we do, because we try to make it easy. We try to make it a really low barrier to getting involved. So.
Don't you think also, I think the missions are somewhat different. I mean, when you look at 826, it's providing for another population, and so anyone who volunteers understands that they're giving themselves to the needs of someone else, which is a little different than, I think, a theater company, which is more about whoever's involved is actually kind of taking something out of it in some way, whether it's the opportunity to be on stage or express themselves. They're not necessarily serving another population, kind of serving a community they want to be a part of. So it seems like it might be a little harder to rally that for other purposes, unless you can build kind of an ongoing community that does that.
That's a key thing. Did you have a question?
So when somebody volunteers, do they volunteer, let's say they're going to a school, they just go for a set amount of whatever they can fit into their schedule, an hour, 2 hours, all day in a classroom, or what does it really entail?
We work with the teachers to find out when they want us there, of course. So with our in-school program, we have pretty set times that we will visit certain classrooms, and there's a schedule. And so a volunteer that wants to go into schools can see our whole schedule and can see the age levels that we're working with, the times that the teacher is receptive to having us. We try to concentrate and have all of our volunteers for one classroom go at the same time. It's not just sort of whenever, because that's most helpful to the teacher generally. And that's how it's set up. For the in-school program, that's probably our most structured volunteer opportunity, and we ask that people, if at all possible, put in about a 2-month commitment. So I said before, we don't have many commitments. The in-school one, we really love that consistency. So it doesn't happen every time, but what usually happens is a volunteer starts going into a classroom and it's pretty meaningful, and they stay all year, or at least all semester.
And there's also opportunities for people to do one-on-one outside of school?
Yeah, in our tutoring programs, which is homework help, all subjects. We do that at Liberty Street and at Ypsilanti Middle School. So those are afternoon, roughly like 3:30 to 5:30 time frame. And those are drop-in for the students. So why it's great for the students is, when if you could think back to middle school, when you have that like awful day where you have homework in every class and you don't understand any of it and it's just a horrible day, that's the day you can go to 826. You don't have to be signed up to be a Tuesday person or whatever, it's drop-in when you need it. And volunteers drop in too. We love it when they say, I promise to be here every single Thursday. That makes our lives easier. But if they just want to drop in, they can. And that kind of lowers the barrier for folks to get involved. But yeah, and then there are evening things and lots of other options. Anyone else?
How does the school actually arrange it? Does there have to be somebody from the school supervising since it's at the school? Or
Yeah, we're in classrooms actually during the day. So we work almost exclusively with teachers who invite us to come. We never go at a principal's behest or anything like that. Teachers approach us and ask if we can meet their needs, and that's how we do it. Yeah. And we're I didn't emphasize this too much because it's sort of different talk, but we're very deeply pro-teacher. So our program is not about going in and changing what teachers are doing or trying to change the culture of their classroom. We're trying to help them most effectively do their work. And we always come invited. Anyone else have questions or thoughts? No?
Actually,
yes.
I have one.
Yes.
So you concentrate on writing.
Yes.
When I was substitute teaching, I would bring in something and made an object, and like have them guess what it was because they might not have seen it. Or bring in, I had a little kit that I made for our kids that was like card shaped, but it was all the different materials, paper, cloth, plastic in the house, pairs, and said, match these up, what's different, what are the characteristics. So do you ever get anything like that that's like a different like categorization, or how to narrow down a problem by asking questions or anything like that?
Yeah, the kind of work that you're talking about is a lot more characteristic of our writing workshop program, which happens in the evening, and those are all taught by volunteers. So volunteers come up with a proposal. You sound like you have one that's brewing in your mind, which would be great. But volunteers come up with one like Amy's proposal to do a walk in the Arb with students and have them write about the things they see and do photos. And so, yeah, those are all volunteer-led. There really isn't an 826 curriculum per se. We don't, as I said before, we don't do a lot of teaching. We do a lot of taking the lead of volunteers in our communities and letting them lead it. So the idea that you just brought forth is
and the follow-up to that is that I know a lot of kids that have trouble with language are actually really good spatially and with their hands and stuff. So they actually do robot stuff? Do you ever get into the maker community at all? Or?
We've done just a little bit with that. I have to say we haven't done as much, but we've done a lot of things that I would say are kind of ancillary projects to writing. We have, this is kind of a cool story. There's an artist locally, and his name is escaping me, but he does paper folding, kind of like origami, but he does this really innovative pop-up paper kind of stuff. And he did some workshops with our students. He's done them over many years with us, and he had an opportunity to film a segment with students and do it for Sesame Street, and so that's going to air. Some of our students will be on Sesame Street folding paper and doing things with this local artist. That's the kind of stuff that we love to do. We're doing like a movement and writing class, I think, next week. So we do lots of things other than just writing.
Yeah, he's been at many maker fairs.
Oh yeah, that I can't remember his name now. I wish I could come up with it. Yes.
When you have out-of-school activities, are you a bit skittish about your liability? And then number two, do you have two adults? Because people are skeptical about taking a one-on-one or things like that. Are those requirements that are made up by you or required of you?
Yes. We never have adults and students alone in the same space. So all of our activities, like our after-school activities, take place in either our space, or we have a space at Ypsilanti Middle School that is ours. There's always more than one adult.
Take your field trip, for example. Things are always subject to being liable in these. Do you carry a liability insurance of any sort?
Yes.
Just to cover those details?
Oh yeah. Yeah,
okay.
We're insured for our space.
Okay.
Definitely. We take that really seriously. And of course, we do background checks on our volunteers and make sure that they're safe as well. Yeah.
Do you ever take the children into businesses and give them a taste of different business opportunities that might present down the road for them as they plan for a career?
We've done a few things like that. More often it takes the form of business leaders coming to us and presenting in our space. We actually met this morning with a man that works at Edward Jones here in town, and he would like to do a financial literacy thing with our students at Ypsilanti Middle School. And I think that's marvelous. It fits right into sort of a youth development after school piece, and we're going to take him up on that offer. So things like that happen. It's not a core part of our program, but it definitely is important.
You could do like a career day.
Sure.
In your space, and you have different business owners come in and talk about what they do.
Yeah, no, that's definitely in line.
It'd be more difficult than to take the whole group. I think.
We do. I know that
Transportation and
Right, I gave the example of the one that we do in the ARB, and that's actually pretty unusual for us. That's using a unique local resource, but we don't do most of our programs like that in offsite venues. They're either at our site, or we work in all the Ypsilanti District Library locations. We offer drop-in writing and things like that. So we're usually in more of an established space rather than taking students out. Anyone else?
Well, thank you so much,
Thank you so much. Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
And I do encourage you, if you want to volunteer, there are lots of ways to do it. It's a really cool organization to be a part of, and I am thrilled that they allow someone like me on their board. We will be doing our next event, like I said, on March 28th. The next time it'll be at Connor O'Neill's, and we'll be, like I said, doing the exit interview. We'll be talking to some people who are actually moving away from Ann Arbor, and we'll find out why, what they'll miss, what they won't miss. Kind of, it's always kind of, that's why it's an exit interview.
Interesting.
Businesses do it. We thought it'd be interesting to do it at a kind of a community level. Like I said, if you have ideas, you have feedback, don't hesitate to shoot me an email, jeff@concentratemedia.com. We got to thank Eric for letting us be in the space. Thanks, Eric. You know, grab a drink, before you leave. And also I have to mention that we are underwritten by the Michigan State Housing Authority. They are very interested in how we develop a community conversation about these various topics, and so that's why they underwrite the series. Thanks again for coming.
Thank you.
And don't hesitate to introduce yourselves to each other.
Oh, please do. I'm happy to chat one-on-one with anyone. All right.
Let me get a shot of that slide.
Thank you. I'd love to. Sorry. I want to talk to people and chat. Everybody's in a reserve. Yeah, would you like to be in our